Hello, welcome back to our parenting webinar series. I'm Alice Morgan Clare and I'm the Assistant Educational Psychologist on the West Sussex Mental Health Support Teams, and I welcome you to the fourth webinar in our series for parents of teenagers, and the focus of this webinar is helping your child with anger. Before we start to look at how we can support our teenagers when they are struggling to control feelings of anger, we first need to remember that, just like with anxiety, anger has played a very important role in the survival of the human species. Without anger, we would not have been able to defend ourselves, our families, our space, and our food. Anger is a response to a perceived threat and is generally the fight response to a situation. Just like anxiety, problems arise when a person's internal alarm system and their amygdala becomes overly sensitive to perceived threats, and that person goes into fight mode when they don't always need to. Anger is problematic when it becomes a common response to a situation where it's really not necessary, and when it is the first response to many situations. When talking about and dealing with anger, it's really important to remember a few things. Firstly, anger is a very triggering emotion. When our child gets angry, particularly with us, it can bring up all sorts of feelings, ranging from reflective anger to feelings of failure, guilt, and even fear. It is absolutely crucial that when we are dealing with anger, we are able to look after ourselves, keep ourselves safe, and keep our other children safe too. In other words, remember that we need to put our own life jackets on before we can help others with theirs. It's also interesting to reflect on the fact that all behavior is communication. An angry person is trying to communicate their needs, worries, fears, and insecurities as much as someone who is sad and cries a lot. When it comes to young men, this can be even more important to remember, as the culture that we live in can make it difficult for young men to express their emotions in any way other than anger. It may be really difficult to look past this angry behaviour, but this is something that we need to do if we are going to help our young people to overcome their difficulties. We all feel the full range of emotions shown on the last slide, but not everyone automatically responds in anger. So what is it that makes a person respond in a particular way? Let's have a look at how anger develops and continues in a person. There are a number of reasons that a person may respond angrily to certain situations, and these can include their experiences of how others deal with anger, their beliefs, for example, no one should be able to mess with me, how others react to anger from that young person, physical feelings which may overwhelm the young person, and external factors such as school, bereavement, or relationship breakdowns. Do you ever get a sense that your teenager's anger may be due to one of these factors? You may like to pause the video here whilst you consider this question. There are lots of different beliefs that may lead a young person accepting an angry response as a normal one, and actually one that perhaps they find quite effective. This might include beliefs such as, I don't want people to walk over me, people will think I'm weak, I deserve respect, I should get what I want, people don't take me seriously. If you can think of any others, you might like to note these down now. Equally, and this may be tied up with beliefs, a young person may have learned an angry response from others around them. It's important that we don't look at this as a blame game, but simply a way to understand the roots of anger. So, having a parent or carer who is quick to anger can act as a model to a young person, or perhaps there is a popular person at school who displays angry behaviour, a sibling who uses anger as a way to deal with difficulties, or perhaps a child has witnessed or experienced bullying which has not been dealt with well and is using anger as a form of self-protection. Or perhaps it is the reaction that anger gets that makes the young person keep returning to it as a default reaction. They may well find that from time to time anger gets them what they want. They might, for example, get sent out of maths if they behave in a threatening or aggressive way, and ultimately they don't want to be there, so this seems like a winning solution at the time. They might find that a parent backs down and lets them do what they want, or perhaps their peers or siblings let them get their own way. In some cases, they may even feel that they get a certain social status if they continually display aggressive behavior around their peers, and they may mistake this for a kind of respect. With certain young people I've worked with, this notion of respect was huge. Why did you punch him? He wasn't respecting me. Why did you carry a knife? Because then people respect me. They know not to mess with me. For some young people, anger becomes a default response to certain physical feelings in the body. It is a sign that they're not having their basic needs met. We all have, no doubt, have heard the term hangry, hungry and angry, and we probably all know someone who gets hangry from time to time. It may even be something we recognize in ourselves. But other physical needs may also be expressed through anger. For example, lack of sleep perhaps, feeling run down, or sick, or stressed. All of these things may impact on how well a young person is able to regulate their emotions. For me, when I'm dealing with a young person who is showing aggressive behavior, I always address these basic needs first. Do they need a snack? Do they need something to drink? Or do they just need some time out? Of course, not everything that triggers anger in a young person comes from within themselves, and external factors such as past events, something in the school environment, a relationship breakdown, or bereavement can also affect how a person reacts to triggering situations. In fact, anger is one of the recognized phases in the stages of grief, and it's a really natural response to not only a death of someone close, but also in other situations for which the young person has experienced some sort of loss. Whether that is a separation in a family, a house move, the breakdown of a friendship, or perhaps a difficult transition to secondary school. It is something which we don't often consider, but when it comes to our children's emotions, it's really important that they have clear guidance from adults who have taught them how to express emotions in a safe and contained way. We don't expect children to learn to read without teaching, or swim, or do maths. So why then do we as a society put consequences in place when a child struggles with their behaviour, rather than teaching them? Today, we are going to look at a technique called emotion coaching, which is a strategy we can use to teach our children how to regulate their big emotions, including anger. Bearing in mind then that behaviour is always a form of communication, when we are supporting young people who struggle with anger, we really need to be able to understand the emotions behind the behaviour. Emotion coaching is a tool which many professionals and parents and carers use to work their way through a young person's angry behaviours, de-escalate situations, and reconnect. There are 5 steps to emotion coaching. Being aware of emotions, both yours and the young person's. Connect with them. Listen to them carefully. Name the emotions. Lots of young people find this really tricky. Problem solve together to find a good solution to the situation. In their research into family types, doctors John and Julie Gottman were able to identify 4 distinct types of parent. So number 1, the dismissing parent. This type of parent dismisses their child's feelings and emotions. They view their child's emotions as trivial, unimportant, or attention-seeking. The child then suppresses their emotions as they learn that there is no point in sharing their emotions as the parent is not moved to react to them. This type of parent may well feel uncomfortable with others expressing their emotions and may well use distraction techniques to move their child out of an emotional state. The child may well go on to have difficulty in regulating their own emotions. This style of parenting is low on both empathy and guidance. Next, we have a disapproving parent. On the other hand, they may offer plenty of guidance to a child or young person who is struggling with their emotions. However, this parent still does not display much empathy when relating to their child. The disapproving parent is more critical than the dismissing parent and has a need to control their child's emotions. They often see the expression of emotions as a weakness which needs to be overcome. Their children learn to suppress their emotions, much as the dismissing parents do. But in addition to this, their children may also find it difficult to develop skills of self-efficacy and a sense of self-esteem, as the parents tend to dictate what they think their child should do in difficult situations, rather than supporting their child to problem solve. The laissez-faire parent is a more empathetic parent than the previous two types. They are willing to accept the child for the emotions they display and will let the child express these. However, this parent may struggle to offer guidance around how the child or young person can work through these emotions and how their emotions impact on their relationships with others. The children of this type of parent may believe that once the emotions have been expressed, then the child can move on and this issue is solved. But this doesn't give the child or the young person the opportunity to deal with the root causes of the problems. Young people who experience this type of parenting can have trouble forming friendships, as they can often be seen as flying off the handle and can be seen as difficult to get along with. And finally, the emotion coaching parent displays a combination of both high empathy and high guidance. They listen to and validate their children's emotions, while also helping them to problem solve and find a solution to the difficulty. Children who experience this parenting growing up are much better able to express their emotions in a healthy way, regulate those emotions, and are able to solve problems. Not only this, but research has also shown that children and young people who are emotionally coached tend to be more resilient, achieve better academically, and have fewer behavioral problems. Looking more closely at emotion coaching helps us to see how parents who use emotion coaching might act. An emotion coaching parent acts with kindness first. Not only this, but they are also then able to express their own emotions in a healthy way, modeling to their children how to deal with challenging situations or big emotions. They do not belittle or dismiss their children's emotions, nor tell them how they should or should not feel. Instead, they see their children's negative emotions as an opportunity to connect with them and create intimacy and trust within the relationship. Whenever we start to do something new, we all need practice, whether we're a young person, a child, or an adult, and the same thing goes for emotion coaching. And just as we wouldn't swim in the channel before swimming the width of our local pool, we would want to start off with some easy practice. As this is a collaborative process based on our relationship with our child, it's always a good idea to start off with yourself. Often we go through our days not really being aware of the emotions we are experiencing. Perhaps we're taught as a child to push our emotions down, and so we rarely express or talk about them. So, as an experiment, I'd like to invite you first to just begin to notice your own emotions at different times of the day. You may even find it useful to keep an emotion diary, where you can track your emotions on a daily basis and begin to find patterns to your triggers. It's also really good practice to talk about your emotions with your child. Make it normal to have conversations about your feelings. For example, if you come across a moment in the day where you feel anxious or nervous or sad or angry or even happy, joyful or proud, you could bring this up over family meal times. For example, I'll tell you something which happened to me today. I couldn't find a parking space at the supermarket, and I ended up driving round and round till I found one. But as I began to back into it, somebody swooped in from the other side. I felt so angry right in that moment. I just wanted to shout and swear at that person. I could feel myself getting really frustrated. It just felt so unfair. That was my space. This may feel uncomfortable at first, but accept any discomfort as a part of the learning process. The more you practice, the easier it gets. It is also important to choose to start with smaller incidents which occur with your teenagers. However tempting it may be to jump in and start with the bigger, more explosive situations, you can build up to more complicated situations as you get used to the techniques. So let's assume that one of the smaller incidents has occurred. Perhaps your teen has got cross with you because you have asked them to bring something down maybe their glasses or cups from their bedroom. Or maybe they react to having been asked to come out with the family. By choosing smaller incidents, one which isn't going to be hugely emotive or difficult to deal with, you will get the opportunity to build your confidence with the process. You don't need to share the process with your child in advance. They're going to get used to the process by watching and learning from you. First of all, ensure that you are calm and grounded in yourself, as the aim is to spread our calm onto the young person. Take some deep breaths, step outside, or splash your face with some cold water, and make this a conscious decision that you will be calm in this situation. But at the same time, you need to be aware of your own emotions. Accept that, yes, your immediate reaction may well have been one of frustration or anger or dismissal. It's important that when we are aware of our emotions, we start with ourselves. The next step is to tune into your child's emotions. Think about how they are feeling and put yourselves in their place. Try to imagine how they're feeling. Is it anger, or is it also frustration? Maybe it's embarrassment, jealousy, shame, or even sadness. All of these can easily present as anger. Only now do you approach your child and attempt to make a connection with them. Use your body language, facial expression, and tone of your voice. They need to know that you are in control and not dysregulated, but also that you are coming from a perspective of caring. If your child is comfortable with it, use the power of gentle touch to connect with them, perhaps a hand on the shoulder or arm. Finally, for this step, you are going to start gently speaking to your child, to empathize with their situation and show that you understand their emotions. You might want to say something like, "You're feeling pretty angry with me, aren't you?" Or, "I know you are frustrated with me." The second step of emotion coaching is to use the time of heightened emotions to make a meaningful connection with your teenagers. This might be something like a squeeze of the hand, a touch of the shoulders. It might simply be sitting beside them or in the same room as them. Or perhaps it would be bringing them a drink or a snack. It could be something a little more than that, such as sitting with them and asking them to look at you and telling them, "It's okay, I'm here." Whatever you do, you want them to feel comfort and reassurance and a sense that you are on their side. You also want to use this as an opportunity to pull them into your calm. As we know, emotions can be quite contagious. So, the more we remain calm, the more we can get them to enter that calm space with us. I am always reminded at this point of one of those kind of idealistic poems that sometimes do the rounds on Facebook. It's a poem about parenting, and I can never remember the rest of it, but there is a line in it which says, "I am your calm place, you are my wild." And I really tried to hold on to those words and put them into practice. When it comes to empathizing authentically with young people, it's good to have a few go-to phrases at first, such as, "I'm thinking you must feel," "If I was in your shoes right now, I might be feeling," "I wouldn't be surprised if you were feeling," at the moment. This becomes easier over time, especially if you get used to naming your emotions in your normal everyday conversations with your teenager. Sometimes it really is just about having the words to express themselves, or if they can't, having you that makes some suggestions for them to help them consider how they might actually be feeling. To help with this, it can be helpful to have a few set phrases that you go to. For example, "I'm thinking you must be feeling quite overwhelmed. If I was in your shoes right now, I might be feeling upset about that situation. It's no wonder you're feeling let down at the moment." Once you have tried to name the emotion that they might be feeling, the next thing to do is the why. In other words, think about why they might be feeling the way they do. For example, it can be really hard to stop and concentrate on your homework when your brother doesn't have any tonight. You can then build on that a bit more, with extra detail to get to the crux of the issue. For example, "And on top of that, I know that maths really isn't your favourite subject, and I bet it's the last thing you want to be doing right now, especially if you aren't quite sure how to make a start with it. We know that this can feel really awkward at first, especially if you've never been spoken to in this way yourself. But this kind of approach really does start the whole interaction with modelling keeping calm as well as establishing a loving connection. Empathy is different to sympathy. Empathy can drive connection, whereas sympathy can make us feel more disconnected. Empathy is all about looking to understand and take on that other person's feelings, avoid judgment, and recognize emotions in others and communicate that. As Brené Brown says, rarely, if ever, does an empathetic response begin with "at least." Seeing the silver lining is not always very helpful when people are in a place of overwhelm. Instead, just being with them through this is the support that most of us need. Empathy isn't just about agreeing with the person and saying, "I know it's difficult for you." It's about getting down into their hole with them, understanding their feelings, and helping them to find a way out together. We might not always get it right, but the young person will feel that you are trying to understand them, you are trying to connect with them, and that you're not just trying to play down their feelings. We need to connect before we correct, and we need to soothe them through the connection before we can begin to help them to correct their behavior and find a better way to react. There's a really lovely video by Brené Brown, and it does a great illustration of what empathy is. These images are taken from it, and I've left the link down below in the description box for you to watch too. So now that we understand how we're going to start with step 1 of emotion coaching technique, I'd like you to have a think about an example of a typical family conflict in your house. Note down your chosen example and pause the video if you need to. For the purposes of demonstration, the situation I'm going to choose is an ongoing situation with curfew. So for your example and your scenario, I would like you to come up with a sentence starter, and then ideally 3 because sentences. For example, my starter might be, "I can tell you aren't happy about me telling you that you need to be home by 9. Now we add in 3 because statements. So in this scenario, these might be, "Because it seems so unfair when your friends are staying out a little later, and you feel as if you are missing out on the fun that they are having, and you are worried that you won't get invited next time." Now, sometimes it might be that your guess at what's happening for them might be way off. They might turn around and say, "No, I'm upset because I think I will miss out, and I'm annoyed because you treat me like I'm a little kid." In this case, you can use this opportunity to validate what they're feeling. "Oh, I understand. So you're angry at me because you think that at your age you should have a later curfew, and it feels like I don't trust you." Just keep mirroring their feelings back until they feel understood and begin to open up more. To have a little bit more practice with this, let's think about another scenario, one which I'm sure is familiar to many of you. Your teenager refuses to get out of bed for school in the morning. What might you say for those because statements? "I can understand why I don't want to get out of bed this morning, because..." Write down or just think about your 3 because statements and pause the video here for as long as you need to. It is only now, at step 5, that we come to the bit which many of us as parents might naturally want to jump right into at the beginning, the problem solving, or perhaps more usually, the "you shoulds." In emotion coaching, we want to move away from an authoritative "I know best and I'm going to tell you" way of problem solving and towards a more collaborative approach. This not only makes your teenager more likely to act on any solutions you come up with, but also gives them the skills they need to be able to solve issues for themselves as they move into adulthood. Only move on to the problem solving when your child is calmer and has moved beyond the emotional heat. This may take a few minutes, or it may well be quite a while later, but the time to try and fix the problem is definitely not in the moment of the emotion. They also need to be in the right frame of mind to find a solution to the problem, and you need to ensure that they are ready by asking them. So, for example, you might say, "Hey, so I have a couple of ideas of how we might be able to go about this in a better way. How about I share those ideas with you?" Or maybe, "So I've had a think and I reckon we could try and fix this. What do you think?" If your teenager is really not ready to address what has happened, then you need to follow their cues and give them a bit more space and time. But it is also important to be really clear with them that you are going to come back to this. So something like, "Look, I totally understand that right now you're not ready to talk about this, but we do need to find an answer because we can't keep having these big blow-ups. So I'm going to give myself some time, get a cup of tea and start the dinner, and we can have a chat in half an hour." Now that hopefully your teenager is on board with trying to find a solution, we can introduce them to the problem-solving technique. And this is where you get to work together. At first, you just want to come up with as many solutions as possible, even if they are utterly ridiculous. It is just about looking at the problem from all sides. So let's take the example of the teenager who doesn't want to get out of bed in the mornings, making everything really stressful for everyone. At a quiet and calm time, you are going to sit down with them and say something like, "This morning was really stressful, wasn't it? And I know that you're finding it really difficult, and we've already talked about why this might be, about your anxious feelings around going to school. So how about we try to come up with ways that we can tackle this? So next time it doesn't come up and end up with you feeling upset or angry." You're going to write your problems down at the top of the piece of this paper, or even on your phone or your tablet. You have to write down all the possible solutions, no matter how unrealistic they may be. So your teenager might suggest that quitting school is the answer. Write it down. You can also add some ideas, so this might give a bit of balance. You might say you could drive them to school for a few days, continuing to support your teenager to come up with ideas for the solutions, remembering not to write off any of their ideas. Can you now think of any solutions which your teenager might suggest? And again, pause the video if you need to. So, the next step is to go through each idea and think of the pros and the cons. So for quitting school, what might the pros be for the teenager? And what might be the cons? And how about the next suggestion? Mum drives to school. What might the pros of this be? And what might the cons? Once you've done this for each of the ideas, you can then ask your teenager to give each idea a score out of 10. This should then bring you to a point where they are able to make a decision as to what the best thing might be, and agree on the next steps together. There may well be times when there isn't a problem to solve, and that your teenager is simply acting angrily to a normal everyday situation. In this case, instead of problem solving, it may be more useful to set limits and help them deal with their emotions in a more productive and positive way. If this is the case, the rules for problem solving still apply. That is, you still need to wait until your child has calmed right down, and they also need to be ready to listen. Setting limits can be really hard, but it's absolutely necessary for a happy and harmonious household. Remember, all emotions are okay, but the way that they are expressed needs to be taken into account, and everyone's feelings in the household also needs to be taken into account. So, you might choose to talk to your teenager about other ways that they can express those pent-up emotions and work them out in other ways. These ways might include using a punch bag, running, up and down the stairs maybe, or breaking up boxes for recycling. Can you come up with any other ways which may be helpful for young people to express their angry emotions in ways that they don't hurt themselves, other people, or property? So, to recap, emotion coaching is a way to make connections with your child or teenager to see opportunities to reach out to them and help them to understand their emotions, problem solve, and to form meaningful relationships. Remember that you need to be aware of your own emotions first, before becoming aware of theirs. Consider what might be behind the anger and help them to see these emotions for what they really are. The anger iceberg is a useful tool when it comes to considering what might actually be behind the anger that you're seeing. For example, we may see angry behavior on the surface, but there could be so many thoughts, feelings, and situations which may be contributing to that anger. The iceberg can also be helpful to use during those conversations when you are helping your teenager name their emotions. There are times when your teenager may need some extra support when dealing with their anger, and this is when it may be useful to reach out for further help. If your teenager's school is covered by the mental health support team, you could talk to your school about getting a referral for one-to-one support. This support takes the form of a CBT-based intervention and is most appropriate where there is mild to moderate underlying anxiety or low mood. For parents who are worried about their child's anger escalating to a point where they may find themselves in trouble with the police, the Youth Offending Parent Support Team can offer one-to-one sessions with the parent to help them work through the difficulties their child is facing. They also offer some family futures support groups, which give parents the opportunity to meet other families who understand the situation. Again, speak to your school about the referrals into these services. They have also produced a series of useful leaflets, which can be found at the website, which is linked in the description box below. We hope that you have found this webinar helpful and interesting, and that you will be able to use the techniques to support your teenager with their feelings of anger. Next time, the webinar in this series will be How to Support Your Teen with Low Mood. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us on our next webinar.